Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Samantha, a dear sister and friend. Samantha has been in Africa for many, many years, so it's good to have you back home, Samantha. It's lovely. So this evening, we're going to explore the topic of risking change to create new pathways, new ways of being and living. And I think it's so relevant for where we are right now because we've all have been undergoing a lot of change. But rather than fearing it, it offers a wonderful opportunity for creating new ways of being and new ways of living. Samantha has had many years in Africa where she's been teaching, living in different countries, and she's also been responsible for starting up meditation centers in a number of countries. So a lot of work in terms of pioneering and finding new ways of doing things has been a part of her experience. So looking forward to Samantha, your sharing your experiences and some of your wisdom as you've navigated through this interesting times in your journey. So welcome, Samantha.
Thanks, Pratipa. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So thank you. And it's really nice to be back in the continent, if not physically, but at least virtually. And an interesting topic. And as Pratipa was saying, that it has been a year, almost a year actually, since the pandemic started of in a way, a forced change. And we know that change is something that is constant. And yet it's something that we always seem to be unprepared for. And today we're just going to look at how we can begin to really face the things that are happening in front of us with a new perspective. But at the same time, and what's been very useful for me, is to look at the gap between what is it that gets in the way of really being able to make very smooth transitions. And so I kind of do want to focus on that this evening, because I think even as a meditator, what's happened for me personally is that through this whole pandemic, it's given me a chance to really explore on a subtle level what's really blocking, what's stopping me from really navigating the changes that I've experienced in a peaceful way. And I can't say that they've all been peaceful, but I think during the upheaval, it's really given me a lot of insight into aspects of myself that I perhaps didn't know. And so they say that, you know, one of the biggest factors of stress is change. And I think the reason why we do get stressed is because it creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. And what we try to do, we try to create boundaries then to stop us from feeling a sense of vulnerability or a sense of insecurity. And yet we know that change means a call for something new. And I think as well as the pandemic of COVID-19, I think the biggest pandemic, and I'm sure you'll all agree, is the pandemic of fear. I mean, now in London specifically, we are on tier 2. And so once again, you know, there's a fear around the number of, not deaths, the number of cases are increasing because testing is increasing. And so people are wondering and thinking, are we going to go into a second lockdown? And you can, you know, all of these conversations are happening. And in a way, it's a bit of a distraction. And I think what's important is to look at what's happening in my mind when I hear all of these things. And so I think, how do we really begin to navigate this whole area of change? And what is the biggest change that we have to risk, really? And I think for me, it's really about changing the relationship with myself. And that's important because the relationship that I have with myself impacts the relationship that I have with others and also my environment and the elements of even my own body. And so as a meditator, I've learned for many, many years that and I experience that I am a spiritual being, a soul. But even with that understanding, there's some resistance that happens in between and stops me from really experiencing that sense of peace all of the time. And so I think what's important is to look at what's happening in my mind in terms of thoughts when situations appear in front of me, which forces me to do something different. It forces a new response. And I can either put my head under the covers and say, well, no, and carry on moving in the same direction. But what's going to happen is that there's going to be several doors that are going to be blocking me until I face what I need to face. You know, we have an inner space centre in Brixton, which is in South London, and every day we do a daily message. And this week's theme has been really interesting. The theme has been, if it's not open, it's not your door, right? And we've been looking at how to really realize our doors and how to actually move through them. And I think change actually gives me an opportunity to move through a new chapter or a new beginning of our own development. And so the biggest risk, I think, if you like, is to begin to look at the relation I have with myself, which really requires a lot of honesty. And I have to then begin to explore my deep-seated belief patterns, which often we see through the kinds of thoughts that we are creating in our minds. And beliefs are such that we're not even aware of them. It's like they're driving us in a certain direction and they're making us respond in a certain way. And unless we step back and examine those things, they're just going to continue. And I'm going to be wondering, why do I feel a certain way? Why do I do this in this situation? So I think this time has given me and people that I've spoken to a time to really look at, in a very honest and deep way, those kinds of patterns that in a way get in the way of moving through change in a very flowing way. And so I do want to share my screen because I do want to show you 3 slides, if I may. Am I able to share the screen? Let's check.
Yes.
And so what I'd like to look at is unhelpful thinking styles, which actually convince us that we don't have to change. So we're very good at convincing ourselves of things that stop us from progressing. And so this is taken from the Center for Clinical Illnesses. I'll just share my screen and then you can see that. And so what are some of the unhelpful thinking styles that stop me, if you like, from making that change and developing a mindset that is positive and powerful for myself and for others? And there's a whole list. And I've just taken 4 for this particular topic. But I think one thing that we do is labeling. And it's about that critical voice that we have inside that speaks when we make a mistake or when others do not fulfill our expectations. And so we label ourselves and we say things like, you know, you're such a ... You can end that sentence. So when we make mistakes, do we say automatically, wow, that was a powerful opportunity for learning? And maybe sometimes we do. But do we internally think that we shouldn't make mistakes? And I think that is dependent on how we were taught as a child about how we look at mistakes. And my background is from the Caribbean, and in my household, you know, mistakes were not like, you know, you don't make mistakes, wasn't permitted. And so I think as a child, I learned that mistakes were something wrong. And so what happens then with that kind of mindset or belief that you're kind of seeing, as a young person is that you then can become very hard on yourself and not give yourself permission to make mistakes. And we know that mistakes is the greatest way in which we learn. And so what's been interesting for me is to look at some of those beliefs that I internalized as a child, and how they can still manifest in very subtle ways. And I think it's subtle because it's what happens internally in terms of the way I talk to myself. And, you know, over the years meditating, it's been much better, but I had to really examine that relationship with myself, which was, you know, in a way quite harsh. And I think if we have that connection with ourselves, then definitely my relationships, it's going to be that way too. Or it's going to be, I'm going to use the relationships perhaps to disguise or to hide the harshness that I have with myself. And so it's interesting to check, when faced with change, what do we say to ourselves? And when others are changing around you, what do you say in your mind about them, particularly when they have not fulfilled your expectations and when they're doing things a little bit differently? And it's creating a feeling of insecurity because you can't quite predict their behavior now. And so labels stick. And it's very important that I begin to, in a way, re-examine the labels that I've given myself and also others. And I think through Rajyoga meditation, I know some of you are meditators for many years. And I think it's through that, through meditation, that we can begin to explore an unlimited dimension of ourselves. And it's really about stepping into those titles of self-respect. And you might call that a label, but this is a label based on something true and powerful. And so one of the things that I've been practicing is just doing that, just taking different titles and not just saying them, but really beginning to feel and explore what that feels like to be loving, or to be in the awareness that I am love. And I think for me, that consciousness is so powerful, and that in itself brings change. And so one is the change that comes from outside, which we are all experiencing. But the other sense of change is when I begin to change my consciousness. And what I see then is that that has an effect not just on myself, but the people around me. And I think it's an interesting time because when there's an external situation like we have now, it brings up people's habits. And the people that you thought you knew, you begin to see a different side of them because they're having to process their own fears and their own insecurities. And so if I can hold a vision which is unlimited and positive for myself and for others, in a way that's a support for individuals as they go through their own journey. And I think that, you know, meditation or spirituality is really an opportunity. It is about our own self-transformation, but it's in that self-transformation that we see a bigger transformation. And it's almost like, you know, having that awareness that I have a responsibility to make that change, because the impact of that is far-reaching. And so the other unhelpful thinking style is filtering. And this is where there's a whole story there, but it's like I focus on one part. I just see this much. And often it's the part that's not very positive, often negative. And so, you know, it's interesting, all the different theories of the pandemic, and, you know, people can get stuck in different theories. And I know just in Global House, you get different sides and different kind of opinions about this pandemic. Some are very relaxed, you know, don't need to bother too much, and others are really kind of, so it's kind of fear-based in a way. And so to what extent do I really see the bigger picture when I'm faced with change? And it really requires a different perspective. And it really requires me to, in a way, be vulnerable. And we often don't like to feel vulnerable because we like to feel that we know. We like to feel that we can explain what's going on and we can reason. But if it's creating heaviness inside, and if it's taking my power away or creating a heavy atmosphere, then I need to look at, how am I seeing this particular situation? How am I seeing the particular person that's involved in the situation? And the third is magnification and minimization. And that's kind of interesting because it's really about my belief about myself, where I magnify, I focus on the positive attributes of others, and it's like I minimize my own. I don't give value to my own specialities. And even if other people are saying, you know, oh, fantastic, you're this or you're that, it's like you don't hear it. And it's like you don't validate it. And so the focus is on other people. And so they're very difficult to move in a direction of change if I'm not able to see my own specialities. And lastly is overgeneralization, where we think that things are inevitable, they're out of our hands. And it's like we don't see the opportunities or the benefits. It's like we make one huge conclusion, and that again will stop us from making the change that we need to make. And so I thought I'd share just four of those. And so, you know, once I begin to see these unhelpful thinking styles, then I can begin to explore the emotions that they trigger. And there are two options with emotions. One, we can explore them because they give us lots of information about ourselves. Or the other aspect is that I can choose to not see them. And there are many ways in which we do that, and we're very clever at it, actually. And I think it's when we feel something very powerfully that gives us so much information in terms of which direction I need to move in. And so just looking at what we do to numb emotions, and again, I've just taken it from a coach, or an embodied coach called Alex Howard. And I wanted to share this with you too. And so 5 different ways, and you can read them, they're actually up there. But one is where I try to change the state of my emotions. And it can be all different levels of addictions. It can be shopping, it can be chocolate eating. For some, it's more severe. But I try to change my emotions on a very temporary level by overindulging in something. And what that does is it just buries it. And while I'm doing that particular thing, shopping or eating my favorite food, whatever it is, for some it's alcohol, it's for drugs. But when I'm doing that, then I don't feel. And when I don't feel, then I'm not picking up the signals that I need to change. So the other thing that we do is that we overanalyze, or we intellectualize our feelings. You know, we try to place it down to some outside factor. You know, for some it might just be the weather, as basic as that, or, you know, and now it's pretty cold here. And so I try to explain my feelings or emotions away by something outside, you know. And again, I'm not in touch with myself. And in fact, I end up being much more disconnected from myself and from others. The blaming and shaming game, you know that, where we make other people responsible for how we're feeling, and we make them feel guilty. I thought the empath was very interesting, where we take on other people's feelings to avoid feeling our own. And so we get so absorbed in other people's stories. And in that way, I don't have to face myself. And maybe that's why, I mean, here, all the soap series, all the, there's like, I think from about 6 till 8, you can just for 2 hours watch one after the other, like these series, right? And people, and I know, you know, people are following them consistently. And in a way, you get lost into that serial. And for that length of time, I don't have to listen to my own inner feelings. And then lastly, somatizing, where I unconsciously express my emotions as physical symptoms. So there are some people who are constantly or saying something about their health, you know, they've got a headache or their back or whatever it is. And any physical pain we know has its roots in something emotional, something that I'm not actually facing. And so what we need to do, we need to accept our emotions. And there are 5 stages of acceptance. And this is taken from the Mindful Self-Compassion workbook. I recommend that, really, really good. And so the first thing that we do, and I think we'd agree, is that we resist. Something's come from outside or it's coming from inside, and it's saying, Sam, you got to change. You got to move in a new direction. And the first thing that we all do is that we say, we resist it. And we want it to go away, that feeling. And then I can turn to the second stage, which is exploring. And I start to examine it and I start to ask myself, well, what am I feeling? And when I do that, when the resistance stops, it's like I give myself space to explore and get to know what's going on inside. And I think at that level and further on, it actually helps me to develop a very positive relationship with myself through my feelings. And so the next level is being able to tolerate it. And sometimes we can't always know why we're feeling what we're feeling. And so it's like I say to myself, I don't like this, but I can stand it. And then allowing, it's okay, I can make space for this feeling. And then befriending, asking myself, what can I learn from this? And I think it's very important because if I don't accept the feelings that are coming up inside of me when change happens, because it does trigger something inside, I'm going to stop sharing, then it's like I miss that opportunity. There we go. And so when I am able to accept, and this is something that I've done and am doing, where I don't always know why I'm feeling a certain way. I don't always know the change that needs to happen. But sometimes I feel that a change is required in whichever level. And I think now what I've done is I've just developed patience and a trust that at the right time, I will know. And so to be able to hold that feeling in a very honest way so that I'm not resisting. And then I'm able to see which direction I need to go. And at least the first step, not the whole path, not the whole journey, but at least the next step I need to take. And so I think it's really about nurturing and developing a relationship with ourselves on the inside. And I think this whole pandemic has really forced us to make that journey inside. And, you know, before we were able to, and still we're in London, we're able to, well, there's some restrictions now, you can't socialize in different households and things like that. But in a way, we were always dependent on something external to make us feel peaceful or happy or safe. And now with these restrictions, the person I might have gone to for that, we can't do that anymore. And so what it does, it's forcing a journey inside to begin to really explore, but not just explore, develop the qualities and the inner treasures that we all have. And when we begin to use them, then in a way, I feel I make change happen. And so it's really understanding that we have a huge treasure store and that it's easy to risk change because having a connection with a higher power, call it the divine or God, it means then that even if I'm unsure, I know that this supreme energy, the divine, knows the whole story, past, present, and future. And I can trust that I'm not sure, but that source is sure. And so I think then it's easier to feel vulnerable because we have a support that is constant and stable. I think we'll all agree that the supports we normally had are actually breaking down, or not even breaking down, they've actually fallen away. And so yes, one is building up my own inner capacity, but the other is really developing and strengthening this connection with the divine. And I think the other aspect that it's really shown is how resilient we are. Most of us are when forced to make a change as drastic as it has been. And I say most because I know in England and Wales and Scotland, there's been a significant increase in the rates of suicides. And so for some, definitely it hasn't been easy. But I think for the majority, there is this capacity to find something deep within the self to make the necessary adjustments, make the necessary changes. And I think that's really something to celebrate. But I always feel that, you know, I don't know, and I think we all don't know how strong we are until we are faced with a situation like this. And I think in a way, you know, today I heard something very beautiful, that it's only when you are going through storms that you're able to really use the powers and the qualities that we all have. You know, recently I've been listening quite regularly to classes by Sister Mahini. She's based in America, and she is the coordinator for the regional coordinator for North and South Americas and the Caribbean. And one of the things that she said, that which I really liked, was, you know, at this time, what we need is two things. It's courage and determination. And I think perhaps the biggest thing is to perhaps sustain a change that we know we need to make. You know, we can start it, we can start off making that change, whether it's internally, the way that I'm thinking.
And then when you next join, it'll come
but then what happens is that we often lack the determination to see it through, because my experience is that when I focus on any power or quality, then in a way it kind of attracts situations just to see if I really do have that quality or that power. And so I think it's really understanding the process of how that works. And I think what can happen is that we make effort to make a change. We're checking, and then we come, sorry, that's traffic control in the background. You can enjoy the music as I'm speaking. And so we make the change, we're doing well. Perhaps it's I'm trying to be more patient with myself, with others. And then something gets triggered. And what tends to happen is that we can not lose hope, but we can feel that we're making so much effort, but the result's not there. And I think that's when we need determination. As she was sharing, courage and determination to just know that this is a little side scene, but it's those two qualities that are going to allow me to move through any obstacle in a very, in an easier way. And the other aspect that I really liked was the whole aspect of having a loving intellect. Because when change happens that is not comfortable, it's so easy to get into judgment, criticism, even confusion. And what that does then, it really breaks my connection with this higher source, with the divine. And it's like I need to keep that channel open so that I'm able to connect, but also pick up signals of what I need to do next. And so how clear is our line with this divine energy? And it is about replacing fear with love. And whatever choices I need to make, it's making those choices, however difficult they may be, but making those choices with the power of love. Because it's love that I feel brings a feeling of peace and stability. When I'm judging in my mind the behavior of another, I'm not able to keep my intellect loving for that individual, then what happens? We just become tired, you know? They're carrying on with what they're doing. And in my mind, I'm holding on to a behavior. And the other day, it was interesting, you know, and there's one particular individual who I find a little bit challenging. So I caught myself really kind of judging. And then I decided, you know, I'm just having so many waste thoughts. And I decided then to just see this soul with a different attitude. And in my mind, it was really genuine. I just said in my mind that that soul is an angel. Because actually she is, you know, when she's having a good day, you can really see the specialities. And I really think for me, that was a really powerful practice to really kind of go beyond the behavior, the habit, and to get to the essence of that individual. And I could feel that as that person was talking to me, and I was just holding that elevated vision for herself and perhaps myself, I could just feel the energy shift in that space, and I could almost feel her energy shift. And I think these are the kind of changes we need to make, because I think everybody's going through something or another. And I feel that we can all be a support for each other in different ways. And I think the main way is just through our consciousness. What am I still holding in my mind for certain individuals? What am I still holding in my mind for about myself? And so I always feel that, you know, as a meditator and practicing for some time, that for me now, it's really about deepening my connection with God, with the Supreme Soul, because it's like a powerful mirror. And I think God's vision of all of us is very, very elevated. And I feel that what he, she, it is saying is simply make this one change. See what I see. See yourself in your original form. And it's almost like, yes, I recognize the thought patterns that are happening. And I respect that they're there, and I respect that I'm working on that, and I accept that. But at the same time, I feel it's definitely time just to, in a way, step into that. And the more I step into that vision of ourselves as being quite remarkable, really elevated, if you like, then that vision, I think, will gradually reduce the thinking styles that are not very helpful. And so I think it's almost a balance. I need to be able to know what's going on there, because that can block my connection. But at the same time, I need to begin to explore the vision that God has of all of us. And that's one thing that I've been doing, just really feeling not just the depth of God's love, and we say that God is an ocean of love, but really beginning to explore the capacity within this soul for love. And what that brings up is, of course, the things that you need to let go of, right? Because we often confuse love with attachment. And I think that this time that we have is so, so crucial, so important. I almost feel it's a time where we can make so much effort. I really don't know the situation in South Africa, but definitely here in London, you know, where things have slowed down, and where there are, especially in terms of the house, where we don't have the centre here, where we don't have the public coming. We have the regular students coming, and everything is on Zoom. And of course, you can be every moment on a Zoom class. But I think, again, it's really beginning to look at my time, our time, and to begin to see where I can, it's not a question of stopping action, but it's really a question of doing whatever I do with quality, where I can begin to, whilst I am in action, be in that stage of meditation. And I think that's the determination. Can I hold a very high vibration whilst going about the things that we all have to do? And for me, that is the change. And it does require attention. It does require more effort, because it's so easy to get lost in the task, lost in the classes. But to be able to keep that consciousness elevated whilst interacting and whilst doing what we have to do. And maybe that's not even a risk. I wouldn't even call that risking change. I see that now as something, for myself anyway, very, very essential. I can't keep separating. This is my time for meditation. This is the time for action, even if it's very good action, you know? But it's like bringing those two parties together, so that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we're creating a very powerful atmosphere. And I think that's really what the world needs. And the world is perhaps my family, my colleagues at work, but the wider world needs that. It needs the support of the atmosphere. Every single one of us is, I think, responsible for creating that. And it does require power of thoughts and beginning to understand our own inner world of thoughts and feelings, and being able to get to a place of acceptance. And once I get to that place of acceptance, I can then move to creating or stepping into something which is true, which is real. And that is that we are all powerful, resilient, loving beings. And that's the vision. And even if we do stray off, it's like in a very detached way saying, oh, I slipped up there. That's all right. But getting back on track. And that's only possible if we all have a very clear aim and objective for ourselves in terms of the change that we want to bring and the destination that we want to reach. And it's like, it's not just one person reaching that destination, but it's all of us together collectively being able to reach a destination of stability and peace. And it's just a question of starting, I feel, checking, changing, and feeling that I'm moving forward, even if it's one step every day. And I've realized, I've recognized, I've changed. And that's it, realized, recognized, a bit more change, a bit more change. And I think it's very empowering when we make the changes, particularly within our own personalities. And what I'm finding is, in a way, honoring, that's the word, honoring myself, honoring my time, honoring the qualities that are within the soul that I think, you know, God and the practice of meditation has shown, not just me, but all of us. And I think when we step into that feeling of not even self-respect, but just really owning who we really are, owning it, really stepping into it, then the things that are extra, that are in the way, I feel begin to fall away. And I think that's the change. So I want to stop there because I just, you know, I feel I've been speaking for a while. And I think I'd like to do a meditation at this point or take questions. I'm not quite sure how you normally do this, but whether you have any questions, whether I can do a meditation first and then go into questions, what would be better? I think I'll do a meditation.
It's nice. Yeah, I think do a little meditation.
Yeah, yeah, let me do that.
Yeah.
So just sit comfortably now. And just make sure that you're relaxed. I'm sure you are. And just for the next few moments, just your journey inside. And connect to ourselves as we really are. I understand that there's so much potential within either soul. There's so much capacity, so much resilience. And during this last year, I think about all the changes that I have made externally, internally. And I honor that, acknowledge that. And I know and trust that the connection with the divine is a constant one. And even if I may forget sometimes or get distracted, God is constantly there as a support, guiding and filling the soul with so much love, peace, and wisdom. And so it's important just to make sure that I spend time, increase time in this connection with the divine. So in this space of silence, in the awareness of myself as love, I connect to the ocean of love. I imagine just rays of love absorbing and surrounding the soul. And I realize that in this love, it allows me to be courageous. It allows me to accept. It allows me to keep moving forward. And even if it seems uncomfortable at times, all I have to do is take the hand of my supreme guide, hold that hand very tight, and move through the situations, the discomfort. And when I do that, it shows me my own inner power, my own capacity to trust, to love, and to keep determination. And perhaps the biggest change or realization is to know how great we all are, how important, how valuable each and every one of us are. And it's collectively that we can bring not just a personal change, but a change that can benefit this whole world. And it simply starts with our thoughts, creating positive and powerful thoughts for ourselves, for each other, and even for the drama, the situations that happen around us. And to know that within each scene, there is benefit, some benefit. May not see it now, but there is benefit. So just in this silence, just hold this feeling of this connection with the ocean of love. And just merge into that feeling and that experience. It's love that can bring the biggest change within myself and within the world. Om Shanti. And Om Shanti means I am a peaceful soul. So really now, just to ask if there are any questions or clarifications or comments.
So you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask Sam a question, or the alternative is you could write your question on the chat and Sam will take it from there.
Okay, then. Okay, can I go now? Yeah. Hi there, Sam. It's Debbie from Nelspruit.
Hi.
It's really nice, and look who I'm with. Look, I'm with me watching you, and it's just so beautiful to see you again. To hear
Hi,
you.
Debbie. Good to see you. Hi, Andrea.
Very, very much. We miss you and we love you lots.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love you, a very clear and a very powerful session.
Thanks,
Really
Indran.
appreciate
Thanks,
this.
Indrani.
Yes.
Good to see you. You're like a shadow there, but yeah.
Yeah. The lighting is not so grand.
Thank you.
Samantha, the one thing you spoke about, thinking patterns, and I think what stood out a bit for me was you said how labels stick. And it's so interesting because one is the labels we give ourselves, but also how we give labels to others, you know, without realizing. And then it just sort of whatever they do, you interpret it through that label. And so then you don't, sometimes it's not that we don't see the change in others, but we don't want to see the change in others.
True.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then if we don't want to see the change in others, because then it makes us comfortable to hold on to the labels that we do have, you know, it like sort of justifies it. So how have you sort of worked with this aspect, you know, to sometimes to actually recognize that I'm actually stuck with the label here, and to undo that? Yeah.
Is that for myself or for others? Both.
I think they're both connected in a way.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because some of the labels you don't even realize they're kind of happening in the background. But I think for me, let's talk about others first, and going back to that particular individual that I spoke about earlier. And what I really was checking within myself was the effect on my labeling the other person or judging, the effect that it was having on me. And not just that, but then you get into a space where other people are also commenting because we're all seeing the same sanskar. So in a way, it's like, you know, you're labeling it, but it's almost being reinforced by others because they're seeing what you're seeing. And then you can almost get, in a way, caught up in that. And that's what I saw was happening. And I saw how, you know, when I was meditating, it was disturbing my consciousness. So I think I had to really begin to examine, and I actually mapped it, I charted it, you know, how many waste thoughts, literally I did, how many waste thoughts. And I really began to see the damage that it was doing in a very subtle way, because the most important thing is the connection with myself as a spiritual being, but also with God. And then that was it. I think that was it. And then I decided that I have a choice in how I see this individual, because there are some very good qualities and specialities too. And, you know, the first time I thought, okay, and I said to myself, right, in this time, I'm going to really just see her in her angelic form, right? And then something happened and I missed the boat. I wasn't able to do that. And I think it was really practice. I really had to practice. It didn't just happen like that. I'm going to decide to see her as an angel, but I had to practice because the sanskar is there. But I had to consciously choose every time to keep that vision for that individual. And I found that as I practiced, it's fine now, you know? I'm not holding that vision, that negative vision for her based on a sanskar. But I had to be determined, and I had to map it to see the effect of it. And it's funny when you practice something, then it's just like, I'm like, oh, how come I'm not bothered now? How come it's not disturbing me? And so I think it does require consistency, determination. And for me, I needed to chart that to see the effect of that label. So I think that helps. But for myself, I think one label that I wasn't really, I don't know if I gave myself that label, perhaps I didn't see it, but what I began to see in relation to that individual actually was my own sensitivity, that she was triggering a sensitive nature that I hadn't really acknowledged. So it wasn't that I was giving myself a label in that way, but there's something about myself that I hadn't seen, which this interaction enabled me to see it. And then I had to look at what was the sensitivity around, you know? And so, and I think most of that was kind of not wanting validation, but almost, yeah, kind of some validation in a sense, you know, bit of respect would be good, you know what I mean? So I saw myself taking, and it was interesting how, you know, when you do label somebody, another individual, it's actually reflecting something that's lacking within the self, right? And so what that brought up for me was my whole kind of, the whole sensitive nature that was there that I hadn't really identified. I don't see myself as a sensitive person, but I realized actually, yes, and that's what brought it up. And so in a way, it's working on two levels: one, holding a vision for that individual, but also then saying, oh, wow, yeah, that, you know, when you name it, you can actually begin to change it. So naming, there's some sensitivity there, some around, you know, respect or some expectation that she should. What's that all about? Still taking from another human being. And so just having those kinds of conversations was very useful. So that's a really long answer, but I hope I answered your question. So I think in essence, when you label somebody and you're holding that in your mind, step back and ask yourself, what is that triggering in myself? Some kind of weakness, some kind of insecurity there.
There's two questions on the chat. Firstly, Olga says, thank you, Samantha, for taking the time and effort to prepare this very helpful presentation. And then Sean has a question. Should we be making huge changes such as buying a new house, especially when we see our grown-up children wanting to do so, or should we advise them to stay put?
That's a good question. Stay put with you, stay put with them.
To stay put, don't invest in a big thing like that at the moment.
You know, I don't know the situation in South Africa, but I think it's such an uncertain time, really. And I think because we need to create stability as much as we can, and anything extra like the buying of a house is going to take a lot more energy. And I think right now, given the time that we're going through, if we can conserve our energy in terms of our thinking, I think it's a good thing, because we don't know what's around the corner. And any kind of new investment requires a different, more energy, more attention. And if it's not necessary right now, I don't want to say don't do it, but what I would say is that where I can conserve my energy and my decision-making power and the energy of my thoughts, for me, that's the priority. And so that's how I would answer that question. If it's something I need to do, then I need, but if I don't, can I just wait and see what unfolds?
Then there's a question from Sandra. Hi, Samantha. Thank you for the lovely lessons and meditation. I have a very broad question. From a spiritual point of view, what is the reason or lesson of this phase of COVID we're experiencing? So what do you see the lesson in this is all about?
Well, I'll just talk what I feel, because I think it's different for each one. But I think it's an indicator. I think it's a signal. I think it's a signal that things are speeding up. It's a signal that we have to make some serious changes, as I shared. And I think it's giving us time to really develop a capacity for another scene. I don't want to kind of get into like mass destruction, but, you know, I say during this COVID, really, in this country anyway, in the UK, we've still had electricity, okay, for a while we couldn't go out. But yes, many people have left the body. But I feel personally that there are worse scenes to come. Don't want to sound kind of pessimistic, but I really feel that this is a rehearsal. This is a preparation where we can all begin to build our capacity, because at the end of the day, it's my stage and the power of my mind and my own inner stability that will help not just myself, but others. So I do feel that this has been, in a way, a window to do some real serious inner work, right? Because we don't know what's coming. And I think, I feel COVID will come and go. The effect of that now is recession and all of that. The economy is hugely affected by that. And soon we are leaving the EU. So lots of things happening here. But I think it's a little rehearsal. And it's a chance to build capacity.
One last question, because we're already over with time. I hope that's okay with you. One more question. But I think, one of the things that you've shared really, it's that ultimately to help us move through the change and also to allow for that inner change within ourselves, almost calls on us to, at this time, to really have a much more deeper relationship with God and faith in God, And I think many people do believe in God, and maybe to some extent also have that faith. But often when you're faced with the crisis, it's like that's the test of your faith, almost in a way. And so what would you say for you has helped you to strengthen that faith and trust in God? Because, this relationship with God is quite an invisible thing, and yet it's a very powerful energy in a sense, but it's something that happens internally a lot, in a way. So what has helped you to strengthen faith?
Well, I think, before the pandemic, I think spending 20 years in the Southern African continent, in Southern Africa, and a lot of changes there, I think that was a very huge opportunity to really increase and develop my faith, going to new countries and, helping to start service in different places. I think I'm very grateful for that, because in a way that really enabled me to make God my backbone, my strength. And I think now, being back in the UK, which is my birthplace and my spiritual birthplace, I think I think the faith more for me is not about, I trust that Baba's there, but it's more about trusting the vision that Baba has of me and stepping into that, if that makes sense. I think throughout my years, I've really felt God's support and God's strength, and he's guiding me. But I think now what's required is for me to own what he's telling me I am, and not just I am, but we all are. And I think that's the faith. I think faith in God also means a faith in the self, faith in others, and faith in the scenes of the drama. And so I think that's what I need to do now. I think it's about really trusting the vision that God has of all of us, and me being able to adopt that vision for myself and others consistently, not like willy-nilly. But I think for me, that's what I'm working on now, that level of trust.
Good, thank you. It's beautiful. Okay.
Great. So thank you.
Any last questions?
I have a quick question.
Oh, hi, Kaja.
How are you?
Good.
Okay. I have this. Since childhood, I've always been, there was always comparisons, and I felt that I was being competed against, my elder brothers, and always felt that they were, there was always comparison. So I actually grew up believing that I needed to compete and I needed to always be better, or prove myself to always be better. So because of the sanskar that there is, that I've picked up, I feel lately that I'm constantly competing with myself and that I need to be better. So I've I had a realization that I end up not really enjoying the fruit that I receive or the awareness that I receive. And I feel, okay, I received it. I've just had an awareness now, or a realization. I said, okay, good. What next? You know? So it's like a constant competition that I need to do something better all the time. So I end up criticizing myself um, very often. And when I do that, my energy goes and I feel really down after a few days later. And then to pick myself up again, and then, okay, I can do this. I can do it. And I've done it before. I can do it again. But then just to pick myself up again, and I feel low again, you know? And I say, why did I do that? And, you know, the mistake, like you mentioned, I did. And the self-critical thought starts coming. And I'm like, okay. And it gets quite tiring after a while. And then I know that, you know, God is there for me. He's watching over me. And please hold my hand, you know, get me back on track. I need some clarity. But it's like a roller coaster ride, you know?
Yeah. I think,
And by the end of the day, I feel so tired because of all these self-critical thoughts.
yeah.
How do I deal with this?
It's a big question. But I think what I'm picking up really is it's like how my beliefs about success really. And I think we are so conditioned to judge our success through what we do, through our performances. And I think more and more it's really about being. It's about, sometimes we just want to get to the destination of having achieved something, but what's more important is the journey, you know, what happened on the journey, and how much was I connected to myself, how much was I connected to God whilst doing. I think it's kind of it's a huge sanskar, because we live in a world where our sense of self is based on what we do and how we perform. And I think that's a belief system that we all need to check, because it's always subtly in the background, that it's through my performance and perhaps feedback from others that I feel that I've accomplished something. And I think more and more for me, it's about, have I been able to remain peaceful? As opposed to, I mean, the task has to get done, but it's more about my feelings. You know, how much was I able to remember God through the day? How much was I able to remain in my state of truth throughout the day? And for me, it's about redefining what success, maybe that's not the right word, looks like. Because I remember I was very much, especially in my early days in serving in Africa. Don't remember where I was now, but I remember writing Daddy Janki a letter. Daddy Janki, she was the administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris. She's late now, she left. She left us about 7 months ago. And I remember writing her a letter of my day, right? And it was like ridiculous, right? And I wrote her a letter, said, Daddy, this is my day. And I think I was working at the time as a teacher. And, you know, I said, okay, I get up, I make my lunch, we do the morning class, the whole routine. She wrote back and she said, what was her words? Validate what you do, value what you do, and value yourself. Because it was just a list of things and I was exhausted. And I don't think I was valuing myself. I was feeling that it's what I'm doing that gives me value. And it's not what we do, but it's who we are that gives us value. And God values us, no matter what state we're in. And so I feel that's really where we have to shift our focus. Value ourselves for who we are, not for what we do.
Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you.
Welcome. Good to see you.
Same here.
Okay, good. What time is it?
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you for the
Thank
invitation.
you, chat. Yeah, I think it was a very, very inspiring and beautiful conversation that you shared with us. And thank you for the, the insights, and also sharing from your personal experience, because I think that's what makes the whole process so much more tangible for all of us. That when one of us talks from our experience and how we work through things, it just makes it more, possible. So thank you for your time and your lovely energy and being with us. And yes, hope to have you soon with us in person.
Yeah,
Always
sure.
your home is here. Hey, your second home from London.
Nice to see you, Prateep, and thank you. Thanks to everyone that's been here too.
Thank you. So let's just hold a moment of silence together, and then we can end. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Come, take a ride with me to paradise. Heaven's in your heart beating inside. You're alive, the great divine, older than time. You are loved, yes, you are loved, and the stars in our sky, billion-year-old lights light up the sky.